This is a pre-recorded lecture. I would love to come to the United States, but in my position of being a researcher, it would have been a bit risky to cross the border, so we're doing this not live, but pre-recorded. I would like to share a number of insights to the Morgellons disease that we gathered during the last, let's say, 3-4 years of research. And actually, the thing is simple and complex at the same time. If you take things at the right order, it all kind of makes sense and it all ties together in a beautiful way, even if it's not beautiful what comes out of it, but it does tie together. And the basic idea that is needed to solve this jigsaw puzzle is to have a look at the biology of a fungus. So the backbone of understanding Morgellons, it is a fungal infection. Now, if you look at the biology of fungi, it is a species that is taking a couple of steps while developing. You have the phase where there is only mycelium. These are very tiny fibers, growing networks, interconnecting at certain points, and like the mushrooms we have for dinner sometimes that we might collect in the forest. First they grow underground, they grow in the soil, and with the Morgellon fungus it grows inside the body, inside the muscles, inside the blood, inside the bone, hollow part of the bones, inside the brain, so the entire body can get infected with these tiny fibers, the mycelium, which we know as the red and blue fibers, sometimes white fibers in the Morgellons disease. When they had enough of absorbing nutrients from the body, they decide, like every mushroom does, to form a fruiting body. And this starts with these Morgellon fibers growing towards one point, uniting at one point, somewhere in the body, in the space. And this is called the peduncular base. This is basically the point where the growth of the fruiting body starts. Then out of this peduncular base, the fungus starts to grow another type of mycelium. It is much thicker, from a different structure. And this secondary mycelium is forming the morphogenesis of the fruiting body. This would be the mushroom in the forest that then has the typical form of a mushroom in the forest. And in case of the Morgellon, we will see there are some specialities to the morphogenesis these fruiting bodies take. But still, the process is just normal. Out of the peduncular base, you have this secondary mycelium that is taking a shape in the space, forming a morphogenesis that is typical for the fungus. And then this fruiting body develops spores that are contained in some container designed to protect the spore from getting wet and regrowing too early. So it's a kind of container that brings the spore into the stomach of an animal, and then the next life cycle can begin somewhere else. This would be now the normal life cycle of any fungus that grows in nature. And if we find these different stages in the Morgellons disease, we can clearly define this is the backbone of the disease, this is the natural part of something that is completely biological. And all the phenomena related to the Morgellons disease that do not fit into this picture. We then can have a second look at those properties or characteristics that do not fit into the normal life cycle of a fungus. And then we can try to find out where does this come from and for what purpose is it possibly designed. And then we can start to understand all the fringe aspects that are to this disease. But first, as a first step, we can take the normal biology of a fungus. And we did this. I did not make broadband research. We did not have like hundreds of patients coming through, but we had a couple of excellent patients that documented their phenomena that they could see connected to the disease, and we had a huge pile of picture material that we could sort. And actually the way it happened is we took out all the pictures that kind of resembled, and then from the single piles we looked which picture is most representative for this type of phenomenon. And then we kind of had 6 or 7 piles, and we could make the history out of these piles. And I'm going to show you now the most characteristic pictures. There are more characteristic than the average appearance if somebody gets sick and has fruiting bodies or has phenomena that he observes. Normally it is not as clearly and as beautifully shown what it is. This is kind of the collection of the best pictures we could grab from, I think, 14,000 different pictures we captured, or the patient captured. Most of the material was collected by Manuela Bienig. Just to have the name in your mind to honor her work. She spent about 1 year making documentation, like a couple of hours a day. And without this material, it wouldn't have been possible to tie this down to this backbone of a fungal infection. So we can go through the pictures, and here we have the typical appearance of the mycelium, the Morgellon fibers. They are a little bit crumbled when they are dry. When they collect humidity, they look proper and alive. And this is what you can see under the skin, growing in the skin with a microscope, especially well seen if it is already red and blue. These are different things. These are colors pulled into the Morgellon, but they do not actually belong to the biology of the fungus. Fungi have the ability to absorb heavy metals, and these dyes, these blue and red colors, are heavy metal based dyes, so they are preferred by fungi to be absorbed, like every fungi does absorb heavy metals. So this is when we can see them best, when they are colored. But for the biology itself, it doesn't matter. They might as well be white. And now we see how it looks like if these fibers form and merge into one peduncular base. At the beginning, you still can, even in the knot, you can see single fibers. They then extract some kind of reddish, it's always red in this case, reddish glue, and glue together and form a body where you cannot see any single fibers anymore, except of the ones left over that basically connect the peduncular base to the still existing network of mycelium. In the picture it's not shown because this was extracted and separated from the grid it was connected to, but you can still see kind of the connection point at the peduncular base. Then from the peduncular base, the first thick fiber grows. It is shrimp size. If it freely grows inside the intestines, which Morgellons love to do, all these samples are not taken out of the skin or out of the muscles or out of any part of the living body, but they were taken from inside the intestines, where they grow most freely with the highest possible size and perfection in morphogenesis. So there you can see actually what the thing does when it is completely free to develop. So with this picture we'll see the first fiber of the fruiting body developing out of the peduncular base. You can see it kind of at the tip, at the end of the head of the shrimp form. Now not shining red, but you will see in the next picture that the red dot is always involved in the structure. And this is kind of like webbing a carpet. These single fibers merge together trying to find a defined form just by first creating this carpet-like structure, merging together, and then on top of this carpet-like structure, the fruiting body starts to form kind of skin. So it looks like the skin of chicken wings when you grill them, when they're not completely covered. And when they're fully grown, the skin completely encapsulates the carpet-like structure. And what you get is a morphogenesis that actually reminds of, not of fungi, but it reminds of rather vertebrate beings, like higher developed animals or beings. And there is a number of characteristics that can be found in most Morgellon fruitings body that are fully developed. And it is a kind of hip where it bends over. It's a duck type or duck shaped head, actually with one eye on top. What you always can see is a kind of umbilical cord that is connecting the fruiting body still to the network of mycelium to feed it and deliver all the nutrients necessary to grow. This is basically it. And if you look at the overall shape of these fruitings body, these entities are about 24 days old. With some of the patients develop like fruiting bodies during the ovulation, or the process of getting fruiting bodies is kickstarted with the ovulation. It is with the female patients. And after like 24 days, exactly synchronized with a female sexual cycle, these fruiting bodies are aborted as well. So they are at the age of 24 days. And if you compare it actually to the morphogenesis of a fetus, of a human fetus, you will find a bit scary resemblance. It is not exactly the same, but the development stage, kind of, in this development stage, you might get the idea that actually the morphogenesis of this fruiting body is not mushroom-like, but it is rather human-like. This is weird at this moment, but if we look deeper into actually the genetics of fungi, we will find that this is actually a quite normal behavior. We find it in nature as well. What we need to have a look at is this spore-carrying eye. Normally, most of the cases when it comes out, it doesn't carry any spores anymore. It took years to find one picture where it's about peppercorn size, this eye, till we found a peppercorn-sized remain of an eye that still carried the spores of these hexagonal structures or spore containers. The spores of themselves are inside the structure, much smaller. But this is kind of the visual proof that actually these one eye in the middle of the head of the little shrimp growing there carries these hexagons that are known to appear also when being extracted through the skin of the patients. And this is how they actually look like. There you can see already little Morgellon fibers growing out of the structure while it is falling apart. And if you put it into some agar thing to let it to really feed the Morgellon and let it grow, you can see that very quickly a new network of Morgellon mycelium is developing out of the hexagon. Now, if you start to think into the direction of what type of morphogenesis is displayed with these fruiting bodies, you realize that actually there are more male and female appearing fruiting bodies that have different shapes, different forms. And these male and female actually carry things that resemble the reproductive organs of spiders. The male ones carry a kind of like whitish egg-like structure. With spiders, this is basically the bag where the sperm of the spider is contained. He carries it somewhere under the leg. And with the female structures, you will find like ovaries, looking like ovaries actually, that carry these tiny little red cells that are also connected to the disease. We could not find any active function of this two-sex biology. It is just a morphogenesis displaying something that shows us that we do have basically a morphogenesis of a being that lives in separated genders, just by displaying something that resembles reproductive organs. This actually is the entire backbone of the disease. This is where we can say, okay, we have a fungal infection. It infects the body, blood, muscles, brain, bones. When it's satisfied, it goes either into the intestines to form big-sized fruiting bodies to reproduce, or sometimes these fruiting bodies actually grow inside the muscles or under the skin in the interconnecting tissue somewhere, and then are extracted by the body through the skin. These are much smaller. They go like 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters in size. Still, they carry the hexagons. So these are also fruiting bodies of a smaller size that still have the full reproductive cycle of the fungus itself. So this is different from patient to patient. So from that point of view, it basically is a story that totally makes sense. There's one good news about this, because it is known why fungi infect humans. And there's actually only one reason to it, one reason to why a fungus is infecting a human, and why the human, this is the more important point, is letting the fungus grow inside his body. And this is when the body is over-acidified and heavy metal poisoned. These are actually the conditions fungi love. They prosper on heavy metals, they prosper on acidity. And if somebody with a human body did not take care of himself during his lifetime and poisoned himself with industrially grown food, antibiotics, we know single stories. For example, one was working as a hairdresser for most of her life, and she was proud never to use gloves, so touch all these beautiful colors, heavy metal based colors, to dye hair just with her fingers. And she got so detoxed by these heavy metal things that at a certain point the body just said, let's grow Morgellons to store all these heavy metals somewhere where they do not bother the body. So this is basically the mechanism. And if you understand the mechanism, it is 100% obvious that the way to get rid of them again is simply to detox the body to the point where there are no poisons and where there is no reason for the body to let Morgellons grow, because the growth of the Morgellon is actually controlled by the biophoton household of the body, by light frequencies that control the growth of all microbes in the body. It was a secret for a long time, but now actually everybody admits, even in the hardcore medical school, that the human body is not human DNA only, but we have much more microbe DNA in ourselves that do all the work for us. And the human part is the smaller part. So that the microbes in the intestines, there are microbes everywhere, all kinds of microbes that work together to keep us alive. And there's hardly anything that is destructive in this field. So if something of this is getting the signal to multiply, from inside, then there is a good reason. And if you remove the reason, then the body gives you the signal, stop multiplying, and then the immune system takes care of the Morgellons, they dissolve, and the disease is gone. So this is kind of the good news. It is not a special infection with fungus. It is in this manner not a special fungus that is more dangerous or more aggressive than all the other symbiotic entities we are living. So this is one clear thing where I say good news for all Morgellon patients. Your disease is curable. Not in the sense of taking antibiotics or flooding your body with toxins to kill the mushroom, but everybody can just remove the initial cause of the problem by living healthy, eating clean, ecologically grown food. Stop eating dairy and meat, and stop eating industrial food with glyphosate and all these poisons they pour on the fields. Just take care of yourself, health-wise, food-wise. This at the same time takes care of our planet, because if nobody consumes this shit is not grown anymore by people who just make money on this shit. Yeah. So this is just a very clear point. Take care of yourself, at the same time you take care of the planet in love, and the reason for this disease disappears. This is now all the things actually one needs to know to the purely biological function and ways this fungal infection interacts with the human body. What might be worth mentioning, once Morgellons have established, actually this is the end of a long process of different disease where the human went through. There are actually two different histories. One is the just natural way for the development of the disease, and this actually starts with a genetic issue, which is called cryptopyruluria. This is something that comes from birth. You cannot fix it. It is just a malfunction of the liver that is not able to process zinc in a proper form. So with a lack of zinc, you destabilize the equilibrium between mercury and copper. The body becomes unable to process copper and take in copper in a proper way, and this actually disables not only copper, many other things cannot be taken up properly without zinc, and vitamin B6, B12 also is involved in this incapability. And then you get a kind of liver malfunction caused by this scarcity of zinc and vitamin Bs. And then the liver stops detoxing your body, and from there it cascades. If you have a toxified system, the first fungus to grow is actually different forms of candida. They have a phase where they are just in balance and in harmony with the body, then you shouldn't be bothered. But at a certain point, when intoxication gets too strong, they also start to grow fibers, a bit smaller than Morgellons, but actually with the same duty in the body of collecting acids and heavy metals. And if at that stage people get sick and take antibiotics or antimycotics, then this candida environment that develops out of the KPU, out of the cryptoluria, it disbalances. The more friendly entities among the candida, the known candida forms, are killed by these medications, and the only survivors that are actually evil forms of candida, not biotic or not probiotic forms of microbes, they resettle the entire environment. And some of these forms, I think the most common name is blood candida. It's a form that actually doesn't even have a fiber of itself. It lives inside red blood cells, and it camouflages itself inside the red blood cells, so the immune system cannot attack it. These types of candida take over the entire candida environment, and they have a special ability to completely shut down the function of the liver because they love acidity, they love heavy metals. So they are not friendly. They're like the few gangsters in a city. And if you kill all the friendly inhabitants of the city and leave it only to gangsters, you must not be surprised when after 5, 6, 7 generations, the entire city is full of gangsters because nothing else survived. This is actually what we do when we take these antibiotic treatments while the candida is prospering due to whatever. Then with this additional disabling of the liver, especially the interstitial liquids, everything in the binding tissue gets poisoned. And then we have another interaction that actually comes in with microwave radiation, with cell phone towers, with the smartphones. The heavy metals pull in the radiation deep into the body. Normally, if you are clean, if you don't have heavy metals, if you don't have metals in the body, the radiation would flow around you because you have your own protective field. The heavy metals form a kind of cluster antenna that pull in these fields deep into the body. And then Borrelia, the Lyme disease, these little spirochetes suffer from panic attacks because they're extremely electrosensitive. And they start to multiply their rate of reproduction because they think we are dying from this radiation. So they feel the need to get more children into the world to survive as a species. And then you have the Lyme disease boiling to certain levels where it becomes a problem. And Lyme also adds up to intoxication if it prospers in this way, and it prospers as long as we are exposing ourselves to radiation, especially microwave. So this comes in from the side, and then the level of intoxication is so high that actually the body says, now we need Morgellons to survive the last couple of years of this life better without heavy metal pressure. So this would be the natural form. So if somebody is really suffering from the disease, the first thing to check is, do I have a genetic defect with a KPU, with a cryptopyroduria? Then I need zinc and vitamin Bs as supplements for the rest of my life if I want to fix it. The alternative to this kind of natural development is to jump in after step 1. There's no cryptopyroduria, but I had a vaccine shot as a child, or I had an antibiotics treatment. So actually you enter this path of development at a little bit later stage, but the rest of the development actually is identical. And there are a couple of side effects to it. For example, many cases of herpes is actually a virus that helps to extract the fungus poisons that the body cannot get rid of. So if somebody is suffering from herpes, it's a sign that he's in this line of development somewhere. If you have like skin irritations, like dermatitis at childhood, or if you have hay fever or asthma, these are secondary detoxing mechanisms. If the liver doesn't manage to detox your body, then first the kidneys take over a part of it, and whatever is not managed by the kidneys is done by the skin and the mucoid skin. So hay fever, asthma, dermatitis, these are all secondary detoxing mechanisms. And if you suffer from any of these, be aware that you might be on a straight path to Morgellons because you are part of this line of intoxication. And if you want to basically reverse the process, you need to stop intoxifying yourself with the wrong diets and start cleansing the body with a couple of possibilities. We worked on actually supplements that carry radionic information to help the body push the right informational buttons. We work with zeolite at certain points, although it's now kind of restricted a bit in the European Union. It's still possible to get it. And yeah, if you want to reverse the process, you need to live healthy and start detoxing. For elderly people especially, I highly recommend to have a look at the protocols of Andreas Moritz. He has detoxing protocols for all organs, and once you're through with this process, your system is completely clean again, like a child, like a 17-year-old. So this is not a problem, it's possible. I just wanted to mention these line of disease that are found on the path to Morgellons as the last stage of a process. For those who might be afraid one day to end up with Morgellons, want to do something before it's too late. So there's kind of a list of disease. If you have those, you can be sure that you actually are on that path and that it's a good idea to reverse it. If you have none of this, don't worry, be happy. Okay. So this was the rather friendly part of this lecture. We are now we'll try to look at the more fringe, the more scary, absurd, funny, difficult to understand aspects of the disease. And I will give you, we will do this in blocks. We'll do this in blocks because certain phenomena relate to each other and have one explanation to all these phenomena. So especially in the Carnicom research, they found out that actually when the Morgellons die, sometimes under certain circumstances, they accumulate silicon or silica or some plastic type materials. So they plastify. The fungus itself, the mycelium, is dead, but still the fiber does not dissolve. So it stays absolutely stable within the human body, which means even a human that is completely healthy, when he takes in a Morgellon fiber, when he swallows it, when it somehow gets into his bloodstream or into his muscles or somehow into the body, even if he is healthy and his immune system manages to kill off all these Morgellons because they are not needed, if they manage to plastify or to form a silicon fiber before the fungus is actually dead, then the fiber structure remains inside the tissue and is just there as a dead part that doesn't belong there. The immune system has no chance to dissolve silicon or silica. And this is why you have the breast implants made out of silicon, because the immune system doesn't relate to this type of material. So there is something that stays after a slight infection in the body that as just an entity is not dangerous, but we have to realize, okay, something stays inside, even if there's not a heavy infection. This is one thing that is not actually part of the natural fungus thing, because normally a fungus, when he dies, he should be dissolved by nature, and this is not the case with Morgellons. This is why we need to have a closer look at this detail. The second detail we need to have a close look at is that actually the Morgellon fibers are white, but while living in the human body, they accumulate blue and red dyes into themselves. And these dyes themselves are not from Morgellon origin. There was a lady at Harvard University in the Nano Lab who captured some of these fibers and also sprayed some of these dyes out of raindrops, out of filtering air. She just collected things coming down from the sky, and she had fibers and she had blue and red dyes. And she did some chemical analysis in the Nano Lab at Harvard, and just published the chemical formulas of these dyes, and she published the material the fibers were made out of. So that was just a very friendly gesture by this lady in Harvard, because normal people and researchers like us, we do not have access to expensive lab equipment. So that was a great service. Because with a chemical formula, you just go into the internet and look for who is dealing with these dyes. And actually, it's easy. You just type in the formula in the full word length, and then you find the companies who hold the patents on these substances. You find scientific papers that show in what context these substances are used. And what you find doing this is actually that this is all connected to transhumanism. So what is transhumanism? It's something that kind of is in the open public now, but actually nobody really relates to the core ideas. If transhumanists try to sell themselves to the public, they say we kind of merge the human with a machine, with a computer, to enhance his abilities, to give him access to the internet without the necessity to stick a cable into a part of his body. You know, just like creating an interface where the machine can serve the human. This is what the transhumanists try to sell to everybody else. If you actually do the other thing and look into the papers, the scientific papers, there's a lot of medical stuff that is kind of okay, you know, diagnosis, drug delivery, things like this. But a certain type of papers is also working on this interface between machine and biology. And if you have a close look at these papers, you realize actually what the transhumanists told you is a bloody lie. It's the opposite. It is all about giving the machine a better access and control over the human body. It's about reading out what goes on inside. So it's like for synthetic telepathy, to read out thoughts and read out emotions. And when you can read something out, you can also play it in using the same channel. And these types of dyes, actually, they first appeared in the context of quantum dots. This was military research at Bell Labs in the United States in 81, 82. And they had already the possibility, these quantum dots, they have the ability to absorb microwave radiation and upconvert this radiation into visible light, sending out single photon emissions that are readable by the DNA cluster of the human body. So it was a method to introduce a microwave into the body that is then inside the body, upconverted to the communication level where the body is actually carrying his informational field. The entire biophoton transfer is internal communication of the body. And the other way around, the same quantum dot dyes collected single photon emissions from the DNA, collected biophotons, down converted them to microwave radiation, sending the microwave out of the body, being detectable by antennas, readable, and reproducible. So basically it's a read-write unit. You can read out a biological or spiritual process. You can read out emotions, you can read out thoughts, store them as a signal in a technical device, and then resend it to another entity to reproduce actually the entire stream of consciousness that was recorded. And this is both mental and emotional. And this is what they did at Bell Labs, and they had the problems that actually these quantum dots were so heavy metal loaded and poisonous that with a slight shift in pH, the people they tested it on got poisoned by these dyes. So they were looking for possibilities to encapsule these dyes so they do not have direct contact with the body to avoid this poisoning effect. And they found two solutions. They found hollow fibers to contain these dyes, and they found like layers of crystalline layers with a few nanometers distance where the dye went in between the layers. And the thing is that actually the entire research you find is talking about artificially created hollow fibers and artificially created photonic plasmonic crystals. But just, as a coincidence, even these artificially created photonic plasmonic crystals are hexagon shaped, exactly like the spore of the Morgellon. And I don't know anything about how this relates. What I can imagine actually is that they did not dare to tell the public that they are playing around with this fungus. Because once they play around with it and you find it as a disease out in the normal world, it would drop back onto them. So they are doing something on the paper that actually is happening nowhere, and at the same time the fungus is producing billions and trillions of hollow fibers and hexagons that suck up quantum dot dyes that actually are found in rainwater and in air samples all over the world. So somebody is introducing the chemicals into the biosphere, waiting for the fungus to spread, to collect the chemicals, up-concentrate them inside the fibers, to create a working interface between radio signals and the human stream of consciousness, both mental and emotional. If you want so, you might dive deeper into this. You can realize actually that blue is the mental body as the quality of the processed light on biophoton level, and red is sexuality instinct. So basically the parts that can be manipulated with external electromagnetic fields are mental and sexual fields, and you find kind of it connects to the politics you can observe out in the world. We are living in a completely ego-driven world where emotions are actually captured and buried in soap operas, in drama triangles of all sorts. And the part where we are supposed to make decisions, it's instinct and mind, and this is exactly the part they push us into because they know that these parts can be controlled. Yeah. So we have a couple of phenomena that definitely connect to peer-reviewed, published, working, fully developed transhumanistic technologies that resemble the Morgellon disease by 100%. And somebody at least is abusing the disease by adding these quantum dot dyes to the biological environment, by spraying it from airplanes or putting it into drinking water, or I don't know where this crap comes in. It's in the air. You just have to decide for yourself how to look at it. I cannot tell you who sprays. I can tell you who developed the things. I'm now speaking for the United States, so I can tell you. Just have a look at Bell Labs, who started the entire thing. And the name doesn't come up, this one. It does, okay. Sometimes, when your subconsciousness blocks information, it might be not too clever to publish them, but have a look at Mitra in the United States. They make all the development of technologies for homeland security and the intelligence community. They could be involved in engineering this disease. This is internal American stuff. I'm not fighting this out for you. This is your part to basically nail down the feet of your governments back to the ground, to follow at least the basic ideas of democracy. There's one more thing that comes into this part of this aspect of the disease. Morgellon patients feel harassed by chemtrails. If they have days with a lot of persistent contrails in the sky, they just feel bad. They have pain everywhere in the body. It drives them mad. And on one hand, this kind of is well designed to link all this into the conspiracy corner. But actually, there is medical evidence to this. If, for example, you look at microscopy of raindrops in Germany, you will find all these agents connected to the transhumanism in these raindrops. It's not too easy to basically analyze what is what, because we do not have this beautiful nanolab the lady in Harvard has. But we can take photos from microscope and we can observe electro-optical phenomena. And what actually can be found in most of the raindrops is barium, strontium, titanate, dotted with europium. This is one very special piezoelectric crystal that has absolutely unique electro-optic properties that can be shown under every microscope. For example, due to the doting with the europium, it upconverts infrared to visible light. Not microwave to visible light, it is kind of the tripling of the frequency. The quantum dots are doubling frequencies, the barium strontium titanate is tripling frequencies. So it's kind of the same concept, but a different mechanism behind. So you can see this by just if you have a probe in the dark field and you come with your finger, here's the material, if you come with your finger to the probe 1-2 centimeters before you touch it, the probe starts to glow because of the body heat of your finger is exciting the barium strontium titanate to emit white light, and it is visible with the eye under the microscope. You do not need special technology for this. This is why we know what these crystals exactly are. This is part of the smart dust, and we had the great luck that under one microscope we had a Morgellon fiber involved. And you can see that these barium strontium titanate is processing fields when it glows. You can see that all these field structures always display the rectangular pattern. And when the Morgellon fiber came into this picture, you could see that the two interact. You can see that the Morgellon fiber kind of makes the barium strontium titanate glow in a close distance to the fiber. So this is kind of a visual proof that Morgellons are utilized as an integrated component of the smart dust that also contains the barium strontium titanate. So this is kind of just to prove that these people who say, oh, there's a chemtrail in the sky, I feel sick, they are not crazy. Because the same thing that happens under the microscope happens in their body. The Morgellon fibers catch up the radiation that is held within this smart dust cluster, and they interact. And if they then emit biophotons into the system, this is right away feelable as pain, for example. Just take the signature of pain and you can utilize a chemtrail, you can utilize smart dust to transport the signal of pure pain into these patients. No problem. Technically, you just need to take somebody, cut a knife into his skin so that he has tremendous pain, record the pattern, and replay it and send it through the grid to everybody, and then everybody is going to be in pain. This is how transhumanism actually works. It's not about medicine, it's not about helping humanity, it's not about making us more intelligent. It's about war, it's about control, it's about torture. Yeah. And this is something we need to understand, because these people are sitting there in completely protected spaces, like the Singularity University, next to Google headquarters, next to NASA headquarters in Silicon Valley. And they think they're above the law. which should not be the case, because what they do is a criminal act. It's a violation, a straight violation of the Nuremberg Treaty that says no medical experiment without the permission of the patient. This is violated worldwide. And there's enough proof in this presentation to take those people to court, if you want to take them to court. Okay, this is kind of one aspect. We have this intelligence community connected to the entities that pretend to be a democratic state, which they are obviously not. And they are abusing aspects of the technology to spy on you, to individually mind control people, and to collectively mind control people. This is their agenda. And I don't even think they believe that they are bad guys themselves. You know, if you take this mindset of a control freak, he says, of course I am good, because I can feel only good intentions inside myself. You know, we need to reduce Earth population by 90%, because if we don't, we will destroy the planet. So I am good because I'm saving the planet. This is how mental madness, illness works. And because I am good, and when I control everything, everything is good. Yeah, so controlling everything is good in itself. This is how their mindsets work. And the only mistake we make is that we just pass our power to them within the democratic system. Telling them, okay, do whatever you like with us. This is what we do when we go to vote, and when we accept that people are supposed to rule over us. But this is no something else. It's politics. It's the question of how to deal with the entire issue, which I actually should leave up to you, because it's none of my business. I'm sitting here in Europe. We have different problems. Okay, so we have this topic of transhumanism, and then there is still a list of things that is not explained yet. And first I'm going to give you the full list of phenomena. Then we're going to all together scratch our heads a bit, and then I can give you the solution. Yeah, maybe you just take a couple of minutes to go to the toilet or take a deep breath, because now it's going to get a bit scary. Up to now it was all human, but this is not entirely human. But we need to understand also the fringe aspects beyond technology and beyond human interest. Okay, so see you in a minute. So, the Morgellons disease has been called delusional parasitosis by a couple of people. This is because there is a phenomenon connected that the patients have the feeling of crawling insects on and under their skin, inside the bones, inside the brain, occupying the entire body. This is a subjective feeling that nobody else can relate to. So people are standing there looking at them, please show me these spiders you're talking about, but they're invisible. Yeah, but they're still there in the perception of the patient. This is connected to all Morgellon patients. So if it's delusional in a way, the thing still is connected to the disease, because other people don't have this. It's only the Morgellon patients who have this feeling of crawling insects and spiders in their body, so it must be somehow connected to the disease. In single cases, we had the phenomenon that actually these spiders jump onto other people who are not infected and start to bother them. So this is also in a different way intersubjective. Like that many people share the same experience, and if many people share the same experience, even if it's not visible, we reach a state of observations where we cannot say it's absolutely delusional. What we can say it's immaterial. This is possible to say because nobody ever found a crawling spider inside the body of a Morgellon patient, not on the material plane. So this is something that is a common phenomenon with other patients who develop fruiting bodies. The second thing that crossed my path, especially at the same time when I was into research of the Morgellons disease, I was researching a second topic, and that was the topic of Earth type and alien black goo. And at a certain point, I had samples of alien black goo just with me. And after I had finished kind of this working day where I dealt with the alien black goo, I approached the place where my healing practitioner lived and where the Morgellon patients were treated. And I came into the room with one of the patients carrying the alien type black goo with me. And this patient completely went up the wall. She said the intensity of these crawling spiders inside me, they multiplied by 100, intensified in a way I have never had that before. And these entities were literally driving her up the wall. And when we removed the alien black goo, the interaction stopped. And they calmed down and it came all back to normal. So there seems to be interconnection between the spiders or the insects that are invisible and immaterial and the substance I now called alien black goo. There's another phenomenon that I thought that it was unique when I first saw it. This is where we also took the samples. It was like something looking like aluminum foil growing out of the skin of a Morgellon patient. And we extracted this metallic material and I kept it for a while because I didn't know what to do with it. I would love to have a lab analysis, but it was a very small portion, so it was too small to send it somewhere. I also was a bit afraid that it would disappear when I sent it somewhere, so I just kept it and waited for the moment where the information, what this is, comes to me in a way. Sometimes we do work non-linearly, which means that we just ask for the solution and it comes by chance. It comes on non-linear ways that we do not expect and where we do not need to fight for things. It feels like being embedded in God's best wishes for mankind. So I had this metal with me and I started to collect informations regarding this metal. And it seems to tie in, at least the information we got on this metal ties in onto the secondary agenda I'm now trying to approach from an angle where I don't scare you off too much. So these are three phenomena we need to tie into a picture and find out what it is. So the first thing we can understand, if you look at these fungi that have a morphogenesis, an outer form in the fruiting body that is not typical for a fungus, and you start reading into the books about genetic manipulation of fungi, you will find that there is one class of fungi that have the ability to host a secondary genetic cluster. So you have the DNA of the fungus, this is one, and then you have a completely different DNA that also is just swimming within the mycelium freely. This is what makes a fungus, every other plant and being has a cell core where the DNA is encapsulated in the core. With a fungus it's different, he has just the mycelium and the DNA is floating freely in the mycelium. This is the general difference between animal and fungi. So Some of them have the ability to host two different DNA types. And normally in nature, they take the secondary DNA from the host. So if you have like a mold fungus living in your intestines and you have broccoli for dinner, and then a day later you have a look at what did the slime mold in your intestine form into when forming a fruiting body, you will realize, oh, the fruiting body looks like a broccoli. This is how it works. It takes over, it absorbs the external DNA and starts to build the morphogenesis exactly in the way the thing it had looked like. You find this phenomenon with, especially with myco-insecticides. These are fungi that are designed, specially genetically modified also, to kill insects, to protect big plantations of fruit trees, for example. So they have a go at the insect, kill it from inside, eat it up from inside, and then they start to grow the fruiting body, absorbing the DNA of the insect and building the fruiting body exactly in the shape and form and size of the insect, even integrating the outer shell of the insect. And then what you have seen as this hexagon carrying eye, and the Morgellon thing, actually in these with these microinsecticides, they fill these spore bodies into the eyes of the insect, making them even glow to attract other insects to get infected by the fungus. And it's not only in this type of nature, it's not only the external morphogenesis, it is also on field level. There is an active, let's say there is an active insect ghost still attached to the secondary genetic cluster inside the mushroom. Even if the insect is completely dissolved, the genetic cluster still is in place. And a genetic cluster always creates a blueprint of life. It creates basically the light body of the species that interacts with other light bodies. So if one insect had been eaten up but the light body is still active, then another insect can be attracted, for example, sexually by this light body, believing that this insect is still alive and wants to mate. So this is how the biology functions. And so if we take into consideration the possibility that we have secondary genetic clusters that in this case are not taken up by eating something, but they are introduced with bacteria into the fungus. It's one special bacterium that is mentioned in these scientific papers on genetic manipulation of fungi that also appears in the connection with the Morgellons disease, and this is the Agrobacterium tumefaciens. This is the one that kind of smuggles the alien DNA into the fungus. So this bacterium is around with Morgellon patients. It had been identified. So there is a secondary genetic cluster imported. I do believe, I cannot tell this for sure, that actually the thing that carries these genetics are these tiny little red cells that Carnicom described as human blood cells in his research without making a genetic analysis. They are funny cells, they are basically immortal. You cannot fry them, you cannot kill them with acids, you can shoot them to space, and they would survive basically everything. And they are red celled and they should carry, or maybe I believe, it's just a belief, because it's this only open point where does these genetics actually come into the game. So if these genetics are introduced into the fungus, multiply inside the fungus, then you get the morphogenesis of a fringe creature. But not only the morphogenesis, with this morphogenesis also it creates a light body, a spirit, a demon, whatever you might call it. There's no scientific language that today grabs all these aspects. It is just basically circularly caught biophotons that form the blueprint of life, that are carried for a while in this secondary genetic cluster. And then if the fruiting body dies off, then what? What happens to this entity? What happens to this artificially created little soul that is out there? And something that was, it was at the beginning just an hypothesis, because we can if you're a spiritual person, you can sense these entities. Some of the patients even can see them, but it's not the way you make science. So it was a little bit difficult to approach it. But what we could approach from the scientific corner is making analysis of the genetics of these things. And it's not through with the Morgellons disease. Carnicom went into this direction, but he didn't finish anything of this. But where we have the very similar process, it is with autistic children carrying ropeworms, which is a very similar concept like the Morgellons. It does start with a slime mold instead with the mycelium. And then the slime mold unites to a fruiting body, and the fruiting body is showing the morphogenesis of something snake-like or worm-like. And the Russians did analyze the genetics of this worm DNA. And they found what was to be expected. They found like a high percentage of fungus genetics, genes. But then they found a weird mixture of 80% human, fruit fly, worm. So they found like DNA that was completely artificially crossed, a crossover uniting species to one that would never go along in normal nature. With the Morgellons, Carnicom kind of got close to the point where he said actually the original type of Morgellons, when they come down from the sky, they are not yet biological. They are made out of some more plastic fiber that then starts to grow as a biological fiber. And he said these fibers are known from biotechnology to encapsulate very simple genetic structures that are built via T-crosses. So he said what they do is actually assemble different species, not in one DNA as one long string, but they have T-junctions. So they take the fruit fly coming from here. This is the human DNA. Here the fruit fly connected. And here we connect the worm. And then the entire thing, when I multiply it inside the fungus, throwing out the morphogenesis of these ropeworms we find in autistic children, creating a demon, a light body, artificial soul, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. Basically, it depends on your belief systems, what the best name for this is. But it is like something equivalent to a human consciousness. It is intelligent because it has 80% human genetics on board. And then the rest of the genetics turn it into something between. And the interesting thing is once you understand this concept and then you go to the Morgellon victims and you ask them, the clairvoyant ones, what actually do you see when you say, I've got spiders in my body? They will paint exactly the morphogenesis that resembles the genetic analysis we had in Russia. Autistic children feel themselves being full of snakes. And these snakes resemble a mixture of snake, fruit fly, worm, and human. And the Morgellon victims, they see insect-like things that very much look like a mixture of human and spider. And fruit fly. Fruit fly is there in the genetics. This is something we just know because sometimes one of these T-junction things break away, and then you have one Morgellon that is multiplying only the part that is broken away. And then you have these fruiting bodies displaying perfect models of the pure fruit fly. It does happen. Yeah, it's well documented in many cases that you have these fruit fly genetics coming out in one piece and in the clear form. The crossover being is not displayed so accurately on the material level. The fruiting bodies look like ugly and not very well formed. But it doesn't mean that the etheric entity behind is not well formed, because on the clairvoyant side, the patients do see quite precise structures and fine-tuned pictures. So we do have something that does connect to a couple of things. It does connect to movies like Matrix, where you see actually the true reality as an idea of the astral realm, like it is inhabited by these strange entities. It reminds me of the Freemason god. You know, they have this spider god that is half spider and half human, and he 100% resembles the pictures of the Morgellon victims draw. So we do get a long list of connections to something that I would call the black magic realm. It is entities and beings that the black magic community was always dealing with, was kind of educated by, and as it looks like, the Morgellons disease is just a way to multiply and give birth to spider demons. This is what it looks like, because every single fruiting body creates one of these etheric beings that then disconnect from the fruiting body and start to live within the astral realm, kind of go through a wormhole into the astral realm, and then get stuck to the body, connecting to the human DNA because the similarity is high enough, and then they can live there as energy vampires, extracting energy from the human, and at the same time influencing him and taking him over at a certain point. This is kind of, for the moment, it seems to be far out. I had more experiences where I said, yes, it does tie in exactly in this way. Let's make it with the example of this metal I mentioned, the aluminum foil looking metal coming out of the skin of Morgellon victims. Yeah, it's exactly in this context. I haven't found this material anywhere else. And the first information I got on this material, it was not hardcore science, it was from a clairvoyant healer in Germany, one of the best ones we have. He just accesses information remotely. So I gave him a sample of this material, asked him, do you have a clue what this is? And he said, ooh, it is an extremely old substance. This substance exists since 500 million years as a technology. He said it is somehow related to the black goo, and it is used for the transit through wormholes. If a being wants to take a transit from one reality layer to a secondary reality layer, normally it's harmful for the being to cross through the wormhole, because it's like passing knives that can cut you into pieces. And this material is designed to lubricate a wormhole transit. And he didn't even know that this was related to the Morgellons disease, as far as I remember. I just gave him the substance. I didn't want any pre-thoughts in his system, so I just told him, can you relate to this? And he did relate to this. And actually, this is exactly what is needed when the etheric being that is developed on the biological plane wants to jump onto the astral plane, which is not so easy as a jump. then it seems to need this lubricant to get through without being harmed. This is one thing. The other thing that ties in this reaction on alien black goo, on meteorite black goo, just to give you a little background what this substance is. It dates back to an event 25,500 years ago, when it somehow seems to be connected to the end of the Atlantean continent. So the event that made Atlantis drown in the ocean also opened a portal to bring in these substances. So this is rather theory. What we know is that we had a meteorite shower 25,500 years ago. And then in all different places of the world, these meteorites came down, encapsulating a black oil stone. And this oil stone, over the ages, wherever it appeared, it was telepathic. People could relate to the stone and start a conversation with a consciousness inside the stone. And the outcome of these conversations actually were always the same. The people who got into communication turned evil and started blood and fire sacrifice cults to serve the entity inside these stones. It started in ages when the world was still matriarchalically designed and organized. At a certain point there was a rebellion against the then black magic orientated female priests, and the men took over, but they fell for the same cults. And wherever you look, the core of the big cults that run on blood and fire sacrifice are initially induced by the communication with this alien black goo, this oil type. With actually, if you look at the function, there is an equivalent material in the Earth context. It's the Earth type black goo, and this has been found to actually be a kind of organic quantum computer that is hosting the collective consciousness of the planet, of our planet. And this is not evil, this is very loving and very, very motherly. If you talk to it, you talk to Mother Earth. It sounds completely far out at the moment, but this is serious research. This is university research. This is military research. It's just not published by the normal newspapers, because the normal newspapers are run by entities that don't want you to know about all these things. But the research is there and it's serious, and I do have samples of all types of goo at my place, and we are pretty sure about how to understand the biofields and the ways of interaction with this material and how it manages to host a collective immortal consciousness. So we have this alien black goo that actually is responsible for the installation of all the black magic cults within the human society, because wherever it appears, it tells people start with blood and fire sacrifice. And when the moment of death is not painful enough, then please start torturing. And this is kind of the culture that is coming out of this interaction. And there is a very strong interaction between this black goo and the demons created by the Morgellon fruiting bodies. Yeah, so this also ties into the black magic realm. And you can tie this into all directions. You say this is too far out, then look at the history of the intelligence communities. They go back to the Tavistock Institute that has founded the Naval Intelligence, founded the previous organization before the CIA has founded all these organizations. And the Tavistock Institute was founded in 1911, financed 50-50 by the British Crown, a black magic bloodline, and the Rothschild family, a black magic bloodline, to kickstart World War I, to spread murder and death and suffering over Europe. Yeah, so yes, if you look the historic path of chemtrailing, of transhumanism, it does tie down to a black magic source. So no wonder that the outcome interacts with black magic substances. And this is one part that is important to understand, because the people who run the transhumanism business, I think most of them are not aware of the other aspect of the things. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe some of them are. I think the normal scientist who is researching photonic plasmonic crystals is not. Maybe the high-ranking members of these cults are fully aware. But it's important to know, because if you have something that has a front end with a nice face, or at least one that appears nice to you, and a back end with a really ugly face, and you realize, ooh, this actually is one entity, and the front end is entirely manipulating humans into the belief that they are doing something good. Once you realize how the back end looks like, and that this actually is the attempt of an alien collective spirit that is attacking planets like attaching spirit would attack another human to take him over. Basically the same concept. And that this spirit does nothing else for ages than restaging the destruction of planets, to then capture the people who live there, put them onto fleets, and go out into space to infect the next planet. This is the concept this entity, the entire one, is running on. It has many names in the human tradition. It is the phoenix from the ash myth from ancient Egypt. They had the black goo, the alien black goo, as the capstone of the pyramid, relating to it as to the phoenix from the ash. Because this is what this entity does. It burns down a planet to death, and then it takes the suffering with it to infect the next biosphere with trauma, to restart the entire process. So this is one, phoenix from the ash. The other one, everybody knows the name I do not even like to take into my mouth, is Satan. Yeah, this is actually Satan, especially important for the Christian community. We are dealing here with Satan. This consciousness is Satan. Satan is spreading his influence with Morgellons, abusing the intelligence communities to spread his influence. And the target, this is something you can see in transhumanism, is turning humans into biorobots. It's not about freedom. It's not about enhancing abilities. And once this mission is accomplished, the human soul is sitting outside, in front of the body, has no access anymore. How this looks like, you can see with the heavy cases of autism, when the human soul has no access anymore. But there's not even an entity installed yet that really could take over. So this is basically the entire setup where you can position the disease in. It is transhumanism, it is black magic. And if you want to not play a part in this sad game, just, it's about time to step out. So this is basically it for those who are already infected. So I'm talking to the patients among the listeners. There's one thing you need to take into consideration that is a little bit strange as well. We had the experience that 90% of the patients who begged for an appointment to get cured did not show up on that day. And this is something where you can already see the biorobot aspect. This disease is psychoactive, it interferes with the human mind, and it makes decisions for you. So if you are under the influence of the disease and you want to cure yourself, you need to find a position that is more heart-related. If you trust your mind, you will forget that you had an appointment with a doctor. You know, the point of where you focus on when you really want healing is your heart chakra, and then the mind is not so important. And then you will remember that you had an appointment. Then you will find the way to the doctor instead of getting lost in the city because something interferes with you. Just be prepared that this disease will try to meddle into your business. This is one thing. And the other thing that needs to be mentioned, there's a psychological aspect connected to it, and this is the victim role. People with the Morgellon infection very much occupy the victim role. And in the overall setup, it's like you have the control of the mind, you have the control of the instinct, so you grab the highest and the lowest chakra in the human system. And the rest of ourselves, or the emotional bit in between, at the moment is caught in the drama triangle. It is caught in victim, persecutor, savior games, just to be caught in a realm that is moving in a circle, keeping the emotional body occupied with doing something that at the end has no sense at all, because the three positions, the perpetrator, the rescuer, and the victim, are just running in a circle, exchanging positions all the time, but nobody is able to see beyond the gaming level. So this is something where Morgellon victims are very strongly caught in being identified with the victim role. So most of the patients who come up to me more come like, I would like to talk about my disease. I feel so shitty all the time. It's so bad. And it goes and goes. And I say, yeah, it's an easy solution. You know, stop eating crap. Full stop. And then it goes, yes, but is kind of the sentence that signals here's the victim role talking. And if you want to cure yourself from this, you need to break the psychology of victimhood. You need to break the body programming that is connected to this drama triangle, keeping you captured in the victim role. Because if you stop being a victim, this disease cannot prosper. And this is kind of the psychological aspect to the disease, where we did not really go into, because we took care with the company biopure.eu producing the it's not medication officially, it's supplements and little helpers to prevent the disease of developing. So we focus on the biochemical side of it and understanding the mechanism of the disease. So this is something everybody can buy, but it does not cover the personal aspect. It does not cover a healer that is grabbing your hand and taking you through the process of healing. So this is something you need to solve in your environment, with your family, with the local healers. And it was funny that we skipped on this topic, because when I got to know Candy, it was like, wow, you know, she did exactly the complementary part to the work. Whatever we did not do, she did. And so I can highly recommend, if the thing is blocked in the area of these psychological problems, in the area of the drama triangle, in the area of cell programming that you need to deprogram with affirmations and affirmative techniques. Candy did an excellent job in refining the rituals and the techniques to reprogram yourself into healing and detoxing. So in a way, this is the first time that Candy and myself, we unite forces. And I have heard that her measures are good enough, more than good enough, to completely solve the problem. And we made the experience that the biochemistry and the diet only also is good enough to entirely solve the problem. And if you are clever, you just watch both sides and take the advice and the techniques from both sides and maybe the remedies. And Yeah, if one alone can do it, the two together will do it for sure. So even if there was a lot of scary and creepy things that I brought into the discussion, actually there's nothing to be afraid about, because if you want to cure yourself, it's easy. All you need to do is do it. Okay, that's it for today. And if there are any questions, I very much hope that the Skype line is stable and nobody interferes with the question and answer minutes to follow now. We'll give our best to make it possible. Okay. Anyway, for now I say goodbye from Germany.